Hi, my name is Bill. This is the second video on the topic of human fallacy or imperfection and self-deception. I mentioned in the previous video about how we as individuals are fundamentally flawed in our learning and our knowledge, and how we store information, how we process information, how we move, how we don't move, and this is how we perceive the world. Now, there are people with certain things that are near perfect in many ways, and there are people that have almost 100% recall from their memory, and some people that have IQs and intelligence that allow them to process information and see things other people don't see. I acknowledge that 100%. But all of those people, no matter how near perfect they may be, are still flawed in some fundamental way. So they have some weakness in some way. If you know somebody that is 100% perfect, well, you better stay around them and hope that they can lead you well. But I haven't met anybody like that. I met people that have certain strengths, and I've met people that have certain weaknesses. And no one has 100% strength in everything. That being said, I'll touch on this topic called self-deception. Self-deception is a very subtle aspect of being flawed. Our mind has the ability to deceive ourselves. We can, if we want to believe something to be true strongly enough, feed us back reasons that aren't exactly true. We can tell ourselves lies in order to justify an action. And we feel if we keep telling ourselves, if we can convince ourselves, and again, we could convince a part of our mind that something is true when in fact is not true. Now, as an example, I want to tell a story. I'll try to make it short, but it always seems to go long. 10 years ago, I was prone to finding people online that just to talk. I like talking to people. I like interacting with people. And I haven't met every type of person out there at the time, so I thought talking to anybody, getting to know them was always a good thing. And if it was a woman, then maybe it would lead to something other than talk. Or if it was a guy, maybe it would lead to something other than a phone conversation, maybe playing basketball or tennis. But this particular example involves me talking to this young woman who was eager to talk to me. Well, as I got on the phone and was talking to her, and I talked to her 4-5 times. And her story is, as I learned her story, it became kind of tragic, but it was an interesting story. But I will tell you that story. She was dating a young man. She was probably in her mid-20s, if I have to say right. So I haven't actually met her. It was just phone conversation. She knew this young man. They were in love. They were on the verge of moving in together. And he was very, in her words, very insightful and very creative, and very much, she considered him someone that was going to change the world. I don't know what he did or what he said. She never actually commented on that part, but she believed he was going to change the world. After some time, I found out that he went and killed himself, and that was a shock. I feel sorry for you. Feel sad. And she was trying to find the reason why her boyfriend killed himself. Well, as I talked to her more, I like to help people. That's always good to help people, and dealing with situations like this, So a loved one dies, you want to help. She goes and tells how she goes to the police to say he would never kill himself and do this and do that, and was really persistent, really broken. Now, it was kind of strange because she just couldn't accept it, but again, not everybody deals with death the same way. But somehow in the process of the conversation, she let out that The day before he killed himself, and this is really, I don't like talking about it because it's a reality that was new to me at the time, and it's still still new in many regards. But she said that the night before he killed himself, or the cops said he killed himself, she had an argument with him, and she said some really bad and ugly things to him. Let me say that again. The night before the police said he killed himself, they had an argument, and she said some really bad and nasty and ugly things to him and left. She said that he tried to call her, but she was mad and didn't want to talk to him. And then when she eventually tried to call him the next day, he obviously wouldn't answer because he had already killed himself. Now, to me and you, I assume you get the same impression that I got. The reason her boyfriend killed himself was because of the things she did. Now, this young woman didn't want to admit this. I suggested, in my comical way I usually do, that she was on that river in Egypt, and she got it right off the bat about being in denial that she might be responsible. And I was kind of really subtle about it. I tried to be very gradual about it. But she adamantly said, no, that's not why he did it. He was stronger than that. That was her response. After talking to her like 2 more times on the phone, she said she was still looking for answers for why her boyfriend killed himself. And even though I quit mentioning the fact that it might be her fault. She really got angry when I suggested that. After this happened, it left me with this hanging idea over my head, like there was something to this story, and I dismissed this out of hand. It wasn't until later, when I was trying to write something down, this story kept popping in my head, and this was definitely self-denial on her part. And then I was curious, because I heard the word, I know how it is applied in sentences and to people, but I don't know a real definition. So, in an attempt to learn a little more, I read up, and I read different definitions, and you could look them up yourself, but I came up with my own definition that still is true, but it's more applicable to this situation, and I think to most situations. I came up with a definition that self-deception is our mind's own need. Okay. Now I'm drawing a blank. Self-deception is a self-defense mechanism in order to protect ourselves from the reality of the world. Put simply, she deceived herself. In some way, if she ever accepted the fact that she was responsible for her boyfriend that she loved dearly, who had great potential, if she was responsible for his death, for him committing suicide, who knows what she would do? She couldn't live anymore. She would probably kill herself as a result. And I'm afraid to say, based upon our last conversation with her, she's either going to live a very stressful life finding an answer that she already has, she doesn't want to admit to, or she probably was going to hurt herself in some way. This act of self-deception on her part was just there to preserve her life, preserve her state of mind, because she could not admit she was responsible for, even though I believe strongly, and if even I related the story properly, you should probably consider that she was at fault for her boyfriend's suicide. Self-deception is something we all do. An example of self-deception in our daily life, you make a decision that's supposed to be based on merit, but it's actually based upon something more akin to liking or disliking somebody. Have you ever, if you're like a boss, supervisor, or manager, and you had to hire somebody, would you hire the person you liked or the person that's best qualified? And sometimes you hire the person that you like the most, and you justify that action by telling yourself a little something like, oh, he's better with people, therefore that's why I hired him. When in reality it was because you just liked him. Or if you did not give somebody a raise or promotion simply because you didn't like them. He's the most qualified person for the job, yet you don't like him. He rubs you the wrong way. So when it comes time for a promotion, you pick the person that you like that's least qualified versus the person you don't like that's most qualified. And of course you tell yourself, oh, that person is probably not a really good people person, even though he's more qualified. That's why I'm not giving him the raise. You won't tell yourself, I don't like him, therefore I'm not giving him the job, though you might, though I hope you don't do that. We deceive ourselves all the time. Anytime you tell yourself in the back of your head over and over again that you're doing something for a certain reason, or that your motive for doing something is a certain thing, that's wrong. You're deceiving yourself. You are, in essence, trying to convince yourself that it's the right course of action. So I would suggest this. Anytime in your daily decision-making activities or your actions, anytime you have to repetitiously remind yourself why you're doing something, it might be because you're trying to convince yourself of a lie. It might be because you're trying to deceive yourself into being comfortable with a decision. And self-deception is one of those things that can really get us bad, because if we deceive ourselves in making any of our decisions, we'll probably make bad decisions. Just like this woman whose boyfriend killed himself. You can't go back from certain things. Now sometimes hiring somebody you like versus hiring somebody you don't like seems a simple decision, even though it's not the best decision for the company. But all in all, self-deception can be a great crutch for our interactions with people. You support your son even though the cops and everyone else says he's guilty of something. You still support him even though deep down you know he's probably guilty, but you try to convince yourself, oh no, he's a good son, he wouldn't do that. No, that was a mistake, that won't happen again. But it might happen again. Somebody might die, somebody might get hurt. I don't think I'm doing this topic very good justice here. The story, I think, holds true for most people. I think you would agree with my conclusion from that story. But I'll end that top part of the topic. I'll touch upon one thing about perfection, if my time permits. Got 1 minute. I spoke of the fallacy of human beings, of human senses, of the mind, different aspects of memory and the analytical side, the perception side. But let me say something about perfection. I think a misconception of what perfection is. Most people see perfection as an end result. Perfection as something that you achieve at the end of something that you are, period. I say this, and I'll end it. Perfection is the journey of being and doing the best that you can. Being better, fixing the mistakes. If you fix your mistakes as you go, then you're being perfect. If you don't make the same mistake twice, you're on the road to perfection. You'll never achieve perfection, but you're on the road to perfection. Perfection is a journey. It's not a destination, to use an old adage there. And with that, I'll end this.